Okay, and all right, let's get rolling. We're talking about Introduction to Iridology today, and thank you so much for being with me. We are going to have some great information here and share a little bit of that foundational information with you about iridology and what it is. So there are three questions that we need to ask or answer today. The first is, what is iridology? The second is, what can it teach us? And the third is, how should it be used? If we answer those questions, we will have done a really decent introduction today. My name is Judith Cobb. I'm a master herbalist, a certified iridologist, a natural nutrition clinical practitioner, a certified comprehensive iridology instructor, mom of 7, grandma of 1, and wife of 1. I've been a holistic health coach for 40 years, and I've been a holistic health instructor for 35 years. And a lot of that instruction, some of it has been to client level people who wanted the information for themselves. And a lot of it has been as a coach and an instructor to practitioners who wanted to up their game in their clinic. All right, so I think we are finally where we need to be there. Fabulous. So what is iridology? Now, the first thing we want to talk about is it's iridology, not iridology. We are looking at the iris of the eye, not the ear. And so it's iridology. So that's one little thing that we want to start with right off the top, is to totally get that up and running, that you know what the correct terminology is. So what is iridology? Well, iridology is primarily the study of the iris or colored part of the eye. So when we're looking at this part of the eye, everything here, we are doing iridology. So iridology is the study of the colored part of the eye. Modern iridologists often include sclerology in their assessment. So when we look at this, we will be looking also at the white of the eye. Now, where the iris of the eye is genetically based, it is inherent. It is not going to change. It's what your parents blessed you with, and it has information in it going back 3 or 4 generations. The sclera is very dynamic. So you don't do anything to change what's in the iris. That's not going to change in a way that you've got control over. But the sclera tells us what is dynamically going on in the body. And it also tells us whether things are getting a little bit worse, or if, for example, these blood vessels were getting paler and thinner and felt like they were receding, it would tell us that things were getting better. So what can iridology teach us? So again, today we're really focusing on the iris of the eye, right? We want to keep that narrow focus with what we're doing today. And again, the iris teaches us about inherent predispositions. So this particular iris tells us this person is predisposed to spending a lot of time functioning in the sympathetic nervous system. So they spend a lot of time with that adrenaline just at the edge of being ready to surge or maybe surging. They spend a lot of time in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. They're always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. They're waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next bomb to go off, the next crisis to happen. And that adrenaline is always just ready to just flood out full force. So when we see that, that gives us valuable information. When we see things like this, again, it also then informs us as to what some of the things are that we might want to ask this client, and it might also inform us as to some of the things that we want to suggest to this client for wellness changes. So we're going to continue on with a bit of an analysis here. This person is predisposed, and we can tell this again from the colors in her eye, she is predisposed to having her liver run the show. So this may show up with any of the compromises in any of the 500, literally 500 things the liver does. On a really obvious level, it might show up as immune symptoms or blood symptoms or energy symptoms or allergies or hormonal issues or digestive issues. And so as we look at the fact that all of those things can be a part of what this means, we then need to understand that iridology is the art of asking the right questions. So the eye gives us information and it teaches us what questions to ask. And so this client in particular came in to see me with recurring bladder infections and allergies. Interesting. And because we see all of the color in here, and we know that the liver wants to run the show, we know that the liver enhances that predisposition towards allergies. We know the liver has massive impact on the immune system, and the fact that her liver wants to run her show then teaches us that it's likely a huge part of why she's got these recurring bladder infections and why she's got allergies that are manifesting. Now, that doesn't mean she's stuck with that, because with iridology, what we want to do is use that information to create a wellness program to help get the liver on track so that she doesn't have to manifest allergies, so she doesn't have to manifest recurring bladder infections. So we would obviously want to consider first her comfort, right? Bladder infections are not fun. They are not comfortable. So yeah, we're going to give her something or recommend something just to help with the symptom of the infections. You know, maybe we're going to do a cranberry and buku combination. Maybe we need to do some golden seal. We need to get her drinking more water. We need to get her cutting out the sugars, things like that to help with a bladder infection. While we're doing that, we need to go in through the liver to help with what it needs to do with getting the liver up and running on that level of the immune system. So, for example, I would consider with this client using something like golden seal. And I would also ask a lot of questions, so like recurring bladder infections, any other strong recurring infective symptoms, like do you frequently get colds? Do you frequently get a flu? Do you catch everything that blows by? Or is it really limited to bladder infections? Because that tells us much as well, especially depending on her age and depending on how many children she's had and whatnot. So there's a lot of that bladder infection can be linked to. And then we want to ask her if she has liver symptoms. Does she have problems? Obviously the immune things. Does she have problems digesting fats? Does she know what her blood cell counts are? Does she know what her hemoglobin is? Does she know what her liver enzyme levels are? Things like that, which can give us more information as to how the liver is working. But we wouldn't think to ask those liver questions if she didn't have the eye colors she's got. So I would strongly consider with a client like this, and did consider and did go this way, using golden seal, because it's a bitter herb that works with getting the liver back on track. And you know, beyond that, again, to do a little bit of bladder support, because we want her to be comfortable while we're doing this. But we also want her to understand that making her bladder more comfortable doesn't mean we've actually taken care of the root of the problem, right? It doesn't mean we've strengthened her immune system and got everything up and running. It's like using an antibiotic to get rid of an infection. Takes care of the symptom, but it doesn't take care of why does the infection keep happening, right? And so as holistic practitioners, we need to take that step back and use the iridology and use the questioning techniques to understand, why does this infection keep coming back? What is going on here that makes us, or that makes her so prone to bladder infections? This, when we talk about iridology in this way, and we're looking at things, you notice I haven't looked for a bladder marker in the eye, right? I haven't looked for even a lymphatic marker in the eye, because lymphatic has so much more to do with so many more things than just the immune. But just taking that overall look, noting that the liver runs her show, means that that's where my focus is going to be. And I'm going to find a way to work with the liver, because if the liver does 500 different things, it's impacting absolutely everything, right? Constitutional iridology is just that. It looks at the overall colors, the overall patterns, the fiber structure. We do look at individual markings, but they are much less important in constitutional iridology. Constitutional iridology does not let us diagnose. So I cannot name a disease. The client came in saying she had recurring bladder infections. I cannot tell her she has a bladder infection. Okay, so that's important. It doesn't diagnose, and it doesn't give us the answers. It doesn't give us the ability to prescribe a remedy. What it does is it gives us insight to ask the questions to understand why the problems are happening, and that gives us the information we need to then create the lifestyle, the food, the supplement changes that need to happen to correct how the body is functioning. Do you notice that I absolutely did not use the word cure or heal? Because that's not what we're really doing. We are bringing the body into a healthy functioning level. In this image that you're looking at now on your screen, this one has a really, really tight collarette. Now, if you are not trained, let me rephrase this, if you have training in another style of iridology, you might call that the autonomic nervous wreath, right? Constitutionally, we call it the collarette. This suggests a whole bunch of predispositions. So this suggests that this client is predisposed to constipation, poor energy production. That's what it suggests. But we have to ask the client. We never tell the client how they're feeling. They might have already figured out that, yes, they have a predisposition towards constipation and poor energy. But if they do steps 1, 2, and 3 on a daily basis, so maybe that's drink more water, eat more veggies, and go for a walk every day, that they actually aren't constipated, that they can regulate their bowel function, and that of course gives them more energy, because when we're constipated we have very low energy. Just saying. So as we look at this and we realize that is her inherent predisposition is towards constipation and poor energy, and she comes in saying, and she actually did, those were her concerns, I have constipation, I have a bowel movement every few days, whether I need to or not, and my energy is just awful. Now, this showed up in her body shape as well, because constipation means reabsorbing of toxicity, of stuff that you're trying to get rid of toxicants, and those toxicants actually make us build bigger fat cells to store them in, and she had a bit of a weight problem when she came in. So, or before she came in, and she was told me when she came in that she was starting to lose weight, and she was really regulating her bowel well. She had figured out that if she ate small meals with lots of vegetables, very little grain, and excellent quality proteins, that she wasn't constipated and her energy was really much better. So she really was interested in knowing if there was anything else she could do. Now, her eyes also, just from the overall patterns and color that we see here, the blue eye with all the white that's in here, really suggests another inherent predisposition. And that is a predisposition towards allergies, particularly allergies that affect the mucous membrane, so things like sinuses. So I asked her if that was a problem, and she said, oh yeah, I have real sinus congestion, real sinus allergies. In the summer, I can't have my windows open because the pollens blowing in are deadly. I don't breathe properly all that way. And so we needed to go in and work with the mucous membranes. And again, her liver would have needed a little support with that. But we also needed to work with making sure that her acid levels were balanced. So constitutionally, even though she has actually zero gut symptoms because she's doing so many things right, if we go in through the gut to help her actually make sure she's digesting her food really well, and if we do a little bit of liver support with her, we find we get amazing results. We do a little bit of mucous membrane support as well. So, you know, a mucilaginous formula, something slippery elm or marshmallow root based kind of thing. Go in through the liver with maybe something really basic like Oregon grape or milk thistle, something like that. And go in through digestion. I love the garden essence enzymes. That's what they're called in Canada. In the US, they're called Proactzyme. And so we went in that way. We did a three-prong approach. We went through the stomach, we went through the liver, and we band-aided, if you will, the mucous membranes. And it was absolutely a perfect way for her to go. It meant that she was able to be very, very comfortable and to totally regulate all of her own allergy symptoms and got to where she pretty much didn't need to do it all the time. She found that when we weren't in pollen season, she was really good and where she had not been before. But when we got into pollen season, she would take these things just as a bit of a supportive mechanism. A lot of people are afraid of the dark brown eyes because they think, I don't see anything in them. How do I read this? I can't even see fiber structure. And that is one of the traits of a true brown eye. You don't actually get to see the fiber structure because the pigment is so dense. Now, this is a woman who's in her mid-50s, and she has hot flashes like nobody's business, just debilitating hot flashes. She'd already figured out her diet 99%. She had a very clean diet. It was mostly organic, lots of vegetable intake, good quality proteins. She really had that figured out. And her vegetable intake included the bitter vegetables, which are great for the liver, things like that. So she was doing great. She also has a very holistic lifestyle. She's very self-aware. She takes time off when she needs it. She gets exercise regularly. She varies her exercise, does some things that are calming, like a good yoga class that is more of the slow class. She does some of the hot yoga. She does a whole bunch of different things to really keep herself in balance. She came to me wanting to get rid of the hot flashes. So her eyes took me in two separate directions, and these are the directions they took me in. The first one is that, excuse me. The first one is that she also, like the first set of eyes we looked at, this client also lives in her sympathetic nervous system. So in spite of all of the good that she's doing, no, let me rephrase that. Because she had already figured this out about herself, she was doing so many right things. When a woman goes through menopause, however, it kind of changes the game. And so that's when we really see if there are some adrenal insufficiencies. And for her, there was. We found that with her, there was enough adrenal insufficiency that it was allowing or triggering hot flashes, that it was interrupting her sleep. And so I asked her about those things. How many hot flashes do you have at night? How do you regenerate in the daytime? What makes your symptoms worse? What makes the hot flashes worse? And she shared with me, and I should just have that right there. There we go. She shared with me, that she had already figured out that certain kinds of stress made things worse. She would really hot flash. Stress was a trigger for her, things like that. And so she was starting to balance that out. But the other direction that her eyes took me was, again, her liver. And that I needed to ask, did she have problems digesting fats? How did she do with anger and issues and holding on to a grudge? And she said, well, she's already worked through all the emotional stuff. She's actually a social worker. And so she knows the techniques for working through the anger and for letting go of grudges and things like that. So that was great. And she wasn't aware of problems digesting fats. So I had to ask her, because both of these things, the nervous system and the liver, show up in her eyes as inherent predispositions. So I had to ask her, do you drink coffee? And she said, yes, she does. And I said, how much do you drink in a day? And she says, 1 little cup of, I think it was Turkish coffee. I don't know anything about coffee, but it's her comfort food. It's what she does, you know, when she just needs that chill moment. She'll have this little cup of Turkish coffee, and she just does 1 a day. And so I asked her if she would consider giving up that coffee for 10 days just as an experiment. And well, that was going to be tough, but she could do it. And she did it. And what she found is that giving up the coffee almost completely got rid of her hot flashes. Interesting. I knew that would happen. And then we had the discussion about, where does that take you now? And she said, well, I can live with the hot flashes. I really want my coffee. And so that's exactly where she went. So she's back to having hot flashes. She didn't want supplements, which probably would not have been able to counter the effect of the coffee anyways. And so we didn't go there. I just encouraged her to work at reducing the coffee, maybe skip a day here or there. You know, if there's days where she really didn't need it, to not have it, because the coffee depletes the adrenals. It sucks your B vitamins out of you. It does so many bad things when a woman is menopausal. And so, and again, this would be a case where sometimes adding B vitamins is enough to balance out the hormones and the hot flashes and feed those adrenal glands and feed the liver. But if it's going up against coffee, the B vitamins don't hold a chance against that. So what we learned, again, from her, was that she lives in her sympathetic system, that her liver also is a significant part of how her body runs the show, of what her body does. And the liver really wants to be in there doing things its way. And so if this client was going to see results, she was going to have to learn to be a little bit nicer to her liver. She was already like 99% there. And but for that 1 cup of coffee a day, she could be all the way there. So how do we use iridology? Well, this again is a super important thing. We use it to guide our questions, and we've talked a little bit about that in this session. We use it to create rapport. So the client comes in and says, I need help with this problem. And then I will take iPhotos, and years ago, before I got a camera, because they're not inexpensive, I would use my handheld equipment, which is tucked away because I was just at a trade show. And I would look at their eyes using my little magnifying glass and my pen light. And when I understand what the client wants help with, there's almost always some kind of an indicator in the iris that helps us to understand why that problem could exist. Now, it doesn't explain 100% why that problem exists, because the client has dietary input. They may be taking supplements. There are lifestyle things they can often do. And so we use the eyes to help us link the client's problem to the questions we need to ask, that the eyes teach us to ask, to give us that deeper understanding of how this client's body is working. As we do that, it creates an amazing level of rapport. We're not asking random questions. We're not just going down an intake form and asking the questions we ask everybody. We are, with the help of iridology, asking only the questions that are relevant and pertinent to our client in that moment. And that is so beneficial in your business, because what it does, if you have a practice, is it helps you to laser in very quickly, and your client feels very heard. They feel like you've listened, you've got it, you know what you're doing. And then we take the answers to their questions, right? The questions we ask, the answers to the questions, their symptoms, and what we've seen in their eyes, and use all of that to inform the recommendations we are going to make. And having all of that is also going to help us to really narrow down the recommendations we are going to make, to distill it down to the 2 or 3 or maybe 4 very specific pieces of homework that we think would be most beneficial to our client, rather than fire hosing them with everything we already know. So that's what iridology is, how it can help us, the information it gives us, how we use it. There it is in a very tiny nutshell. Now, some of you who've joined me are already on my mailing list. You're already a part of my Iridology Education Facebook group, and I love that, love that, love that. I do have a go-round, a new session of Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology starting on November 7th. This is an iridology course that will prepare you to certify with IPA if you so choose. And this course is taught as 20 live 2-hour-long webinars, and tons of downloadable resources, lots of live mentoring, and the live mentoring and the access to the resources continues long after you actually finish your coursework. If you would like to receive general information from me, like when am I doing Facebook Lives, when am I doing free webinars, I would encourage you to hop on over to iridology.education. There's going to be one of those nasty little pop-up boxes that offers you, I believe it's my iridology map is the one I've got going right now. Just plug your information in there and send that back, and you'll be added to my email list. If you are interested in learning more about the iridology course, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, I encourage you to hop on over to iridology.education/priority. Ton of information there, as well as the opportunity to register for the course. Just so you know, I keep my classes very small. You're going to have no more than 10 people in the class. And oftentimes, because this is a really specialized topic, it's not like a weight loss topic where everyone wants to lose weight. This is a really specialized topic, and often my classes only have 5 or 6 students in them, just because it is so specialized. So regardless of whether you're interested in general information or in the course, I hope you'll pop on over to one or both of those addresses to learn more. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks so much for being with me. I really appreciate that. And I will see you again later. Bye for now.